Lincoln, a boy with almost nothing. Not every great leader begins life surrounded by comfort. Some begin with very little. No large house, no expensive education, no famous family, only hard work, long days, and a dream that no one else can see. More than 200 years ago, the American frontier was a place of forests, rivers, and rough roads. Families built small wooden cabins with their own hands. Children helped grow food, carry water, and chop firewood before they were old enough to understand how difficult life truly was. Books were rare. Schools were even rarer, yet sometimes the greatest classroom is not a school at all. Sometimes it is curiosity, sometimes it is determination, and sometimes it is the quiet decision to keep learning, even when no one expects you to succeed. In one small log cabin in Kentucky, a young boy loved listening to stories. Whenever he found a book, he read every page he could. He had little money, very little formal education, but he believed that every new idea made him a little stronger. Years later, that same boy would lead his country through its darkest days. His name was Abraham Lincoln, and his remarkable journey began with a child who refused to let poverty decide his future. A cabin in the wilderness. Abraham Lincoln was born on February 12, 1809, in a small log cabin in Hardin County, Kentucky, now known as LaRue County. The cabin was simple. Its walls were made of rough logs. The floor was plain. The family owned very little. Life on the American frontier demanded constant work. Every day brought new challenges. Trees had to be cut. Fields had to be cleared. Food had to be grown. Young Abraham learned these lessons early. His father, Thomas Lincoln, worked hard to provide for the family. His mother, Nancy Hanks Lincoln, filled their home with kindness and encouragement. Although she had little formal education herself, she believed learning mattered. She encouraged Abraham to read whenever he had the chance. Books were difficult to find. Sometimes neighbors lent one for only a few days. Abraham read quickly, determined to remember every page before returning it. He copied passages onto wooden boards and scraps of paper because books were too valuable to write in. Even as a child, he asked thoughtful questions. He listened carefully to adults telling stories around the fire. Words fascinated him. So did ideas. When Abraham was only 9 years old, tragedy struck. His mother became ill and passed away. The loss left a deep emptiness in the young boy's life. Yet even through sorrow, one lesson remained with him. Knowledge could become a light, even during life's darkest moments. Soon, another person would help that light grow even brighter. Learning by candlelight. About a year after Nancy Lincoln's death, Abraham's father married Sarah Bush Johnston. She brought warmth back into the family home. More importantly, she recognized something special in young Abraham. She saw a boy who loved books more than almost anything else. Sarah encouraged him to keep reading. Whenever she could, she found ways to place books in his hands. Abraham read everything he could borrow: the Bible, Aesop's fables, the life of George Washington, books about history, law, and science. Each story opened another window into the world. His formal education added up to less than 1 year altogether. Schools on the frontier were small and often open for only a few months at a time. Most of Abraham's learning happened at home, or after long days of hard physical work. At night, he sometimes read beside the fireplace or by the light of a single candle. The hours were quiet. Outside, the forests were dark. Inside, every page carried him somewhere new. Neighbors soon noticed the tall young man who always seemed to have a book nearby. Many admired his honesty. Others admired his willingness to help anyone who needed a hand. Without realizing it, Abraham was developing two qualities that would shape his entire life: a love of learning and a deep respect for other people. Those qualities would soon lead him away from the frontier and toward a future no one could yet imagine: finding his own voice. As Abraham Lincoln grew into a young man, his family moved several times, searching for better land and new opportunities. Life remained difficult. There was always work to do. He split rails for fences, plowed fields, loaded heavy wagons, and helped neighbors whenever they needed an extra pair of hands. His tall, strong frame made him an excellent worker, but his greatest strength was something people could not see. It was the way he listened. Abraham enjoyed hearing different opinions. He rarely interrupted. Instead, he thought carefully before speaking. When he did speak, people paid attention. His words were simple, honest, easy to understand. He often entertained friends with stories that made them laugh. Yet behind the humor was wisdom. He knew that a good story could help people see an idea more clearly. Books continued shaping his mind. Whenever he borrowed one, he read it until he understood every page. Then he returned it with gratitude. Step by step, the quiet boy from the frontier became a thoughtful young man. He had no university degree, no wealthy family to guide him, only curiosity, hard work, and a growing belief that words could bring people together. Soon, an unexpected opportunity would allow him to use that gift in public for the very first time. A lawyer without a classroom. As Abraham gained confidence, he became interested in law. The problem was simple. He could not afford to attend a law school, so he chose another path. He taught himself. After finishing long days of work, Abraham opened borrowed law books and studied late into the night. He read slowly. He took careful notes. Whenever he found a difficult idea, he refused to move on until he understood it. Years of self-study finally paid off. In 1836, Abraham Lincoln passed the examination to become a lawyer. He moved to Springfield, Illinois, where he began building his career. The courtroom became another classroom. Lincoln listened closely before making an argument. He preferred facts over loud voices. He believed honesty was the strongest foundation for justice. Clients trusted him because he never promised what he could not deliver. If he believed someone was wrong, he sometimes advised them not to continue the case. That kind of integrity earned him a lasting reputation. People began calling him Honest Abe. The name stayed with him for the rest of his life. As the years passed, Lincoln's reputation grew beyond the courtroom. People admired not only his intelligence but also his fairness. Before long, they encouraged him to enter public life. A much greater challenge was waiting. One that would test both his character and his courage. A nation divided. During the middle of the 19th century, the United States was growing rapidly. New towns appeared. Railroads stretched across the land. People dreamed of new opportunities. But beneath that progress, a deep disagreement was growing. The country was divided over slavery. Some believed it should continue. Others believed it was morally wrong and should eventually come to an end. The debate became more intense with each passing year. Abraham Lincoln followed these discussions carefully. He believed every person deserved dignity. He also believed that the nation could not remain united forever if it stayed divided over such an important issue. In 1858, Lincoln took part in a series of famous debates with Senator Stephen Douglas. Crowds traveled for miles to hear the two men speak. Lincoln did not rely on complicated language. He explained difficult ideas with clear words and thoughtful stories. One sentence from those debates became especially memorable. "A house divided against itself cannot stand." Lincoln was not saying that the country would fall immediately. He was warning that lasting peace could not exist while the nation remained deeply divided. Although he did not win the Senate election, millions of Americans heard his ideas for the first time. His calm voice reached far beyond Illinois. People across the country began to recognize his honesty, his wisdom, and his ability to lead. Soon, they would ask him to carry a responsibility greater than he had ever imagined. The weight of leadership. In November 1860, Abraham Lincoln was elected the 16th President of the United States. For many Americans, it was a moment of hope. For others, it was a moment of fear. Even before Lincoln took office, several Southern states announced that they would leave the Union. The nation he had promised to serve was already beginning to break apart. When Lincoln arrived in Washington, he understood that the challenges ahead would be unlike anything any president had faced before. He did not celebrate his victory for long. There was too much work to do, too many difficult decisions waiting. Lincoln listened carefully to people with different opinions. He invited experienced leaders into his cabinet, even some who had once been his political opponents. He believed that the country needed the strongest ideas, not simply the loudest supporters. Then, in April 1861, fighting began at Fort Sumter. The American Civil War had started. Families found themselves on opposite sides. Friends became enemies. The cost of every decision grew heavier with each passing day. Lincoln often stayed awake late into the night, reading reports from the battlefield. He knew that every order he signed could change countless lives. More than anything else, he wanted to preserve the Union. But as the war continued, another question demanded an answer. Could the nation truly remain united while millions of people were still living in slavery? A new meaning of freedom. As the Civil War continued, Abraham Lincoln realized that saving the Union and ending slavery could no longer be separated. The conflict was about more than land or politics. It had become a struggle over the meaning of freedom itself. Lincoln spent many long evenings thinking about the future of the nation. He read, he wrote, he revised every sentence with great care. He knew that his next decision would become one of the most important of his life. On January 1st, 1863, the Emancipation Proclamation took effect. The document declared that enslaved people in the states still in rebellion against the Union were to be free. It did not immediately end slavery everywhere in the United States, but it changed the purpose of the war. The fight to preserve the nation had also become a fight for human freedom. The announcement reached people in different ways. Many celebrated with joy and hope. Others strongly opposed it. Lincoln understood that one document could not erase generations of suffering. Yet he believed that every lasting change begins with a courageous step. As the war continued, thousands of formerly enslaved men joined the Union Army. They fought not only for their country, but also for the promise of a better future. Lincoln watched these events with quiet determination. He knew that victory would require more than military success. The nation would also need healing, and soon, after one terrible battle, he would speak only a few words that the world would remember forever. A speech that still echoes. In November 1863, the town of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, became the site of a ceremony unlike any other. Just a few months earlier, one of the bloodiest battles of the Civil War had taken place there. Thousands of soldiers had lost their lives. A new cemetery was being dedicated to honor them. Many people expected long speeches from famous leaders. Abraham Lincoln was invited to speak near the end of the ceremony. When his turn came, he stood before the crowd and delivered a speech that lasted only a few minutes. It contained fewer than 300 words. Yet those words carried extraordinary meaning. Lincoln reminded the nation that the United States had been founded on the belief that all people are created equal. He urged those listening not to focus only on the past, but to continue the unfinished work of building a nation worthy of the sacrifices that had been made. His closing hope was simple and powerful: that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. At first, some newspapers paid little attention to the speech. A few even criticized it. But over time, people returned to those words again and again. They discovered that true greatness does not always require many pages. Sometimes, a few honest sentences can inspire generations. The war was not over. More difficult days still lay ahead. But Lincoln had given the nation something it desperately needed. Not only a leader, but a reason to believe that a better future was still possible. The price of peace. By the spring of 1865, the Civil War was finally coming to an end. For 4 long years, the nation had lived through fear, loss, and uncertainty. Cities had been damaged, Families had been separated. Hundreds of thousands of lives had been lost. When news arrived that the Confederate Army had surrendered, people across the country celebrated. Church bells rang. Crowds filled the streets. Many believed that a brighter future had finally begun. Abraham Lincoln welcomed the end of the fighting, but his thoughts were already on the next challenge. Winning the war was only the first step. Healing the nation would be even harder. He spoke about forgiveness rather than revenge. He hoped that people from both sides could rebuild the country together. In his second inaugural address, Lincoln offered words that reflected his deepest hopes. He called for malice toward none, with charity for all. He believed that lasting peace could never grow from hatred alone. Only kindness, justice, and understanding could help a divided nation become one again. Just a few days after the war effectively ended, Lincoln visited a theater in Washington, D.C. On the evening of April 14, 1865, he was watching a play with his wife when he was shot by actor John Wilkes Booth. The next morning, Abraham Lincoln passed away. The nation was overcome with grief. The leader who had guided the country through its darkest years would not live to see the peace he had worked so hard to protect. Yet his ideas were already taking root in the hearts of millions. A leader remembered. After Abraham Lincoln's death, people across the United States gathered to honor his life. His funeral train traveled through many towns and cities. Along the tracks, thousands of people stood silently to pay their respects. Some removed their hats. Others held flowers. Many simply watched in quiet reflection. Lincoln's journey home became a journey shared by an entire nation. Years passed, the country slowly rebuilt itself. Slavery was abolished throughout the United States with the 13th Amendment. The Union remained together. The road ahead was still difficult, but Lincoln's leadership had helped shape a new beginning. Today, Abraham Lincoln is remembered not because he was born into wealth or privilege. He was not. He is remembered because he showed that character can grow from hardship. That learning can begin with a single borrowed book. That honest words can guide people through times of great uncertainty. Visitors from around the world now stand before the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. They read his speeches carved into stone. They look up at the quiet figure seated inside the monument. But perhaps the real monument to Abraham Lincoln is not made of marble. It is found wherever people choose honesty over fear, compassion over anger, and unity over division. Long ago, a young boy sat beside the light of a small fire, reading every book he could find. He never imagined that one day his words would help hold a nation together. Sometimes the strongest leaders do not begin with power. Sometimes they begin with the simple decision to keep learning, to keep listening, and to do what is right, even when it is difficult.